Big story on What's Hot Tonight. In a major decision that may hurt outsourcing of jobs to India and other countries, President of the United States Barack Obama has proposed the removal of tax incentives to American companies shifting jobs abroad. Obama hit out at U.S. tax code and highlighted the loopholes in that system. Let's hear him out.
It's a tax code that says you should pay lower taxes if you create a job in Bangalore, India, than if you create one in Buffalo, New York.
On What's Hot Tonight, we ask, will this protectionist stance of the U.S. government hurt Indian IT companies? Joining us is Pramod Bhasin, chairman of NASSCOM and president and CEO of Genpact, who will be joining us in just a bit. But the barrage against outsourcing has been going on for a while now. In fact, President Obama has announced to do away with steps with tax incentives. He moves to apply United States companies their offshore work. This move, he says, gives him aims so that tax incentives that have been given to these companies create jobs in America instead of creating jobs elsewhere. That's the kind of situation at this point in time. Pramod Bhasin now joins us from Delhi. Pramod, many thanks for joining in. Let me begin by asking you, how do you read this statement by Barack Obama? Is this, in a sense, a move to plug the tax loopholes of the American system, or is it a move, at least intentionally, to prevent outsourcing?
Well, I think it's a little bit of a strange statement, frankly, because it's not clear. The verbiage that he came out with about Bangalore is not reflected in what the actually press release and statements say. This has very little to do with outsourcing. What they're aiming at is tax credits that American corporations get under things like Subpart F income tax rules, as well as foreign income tax credits that they get, which are based on how much companies invest overseas, what are their operations that are run overseas, how much money those operations make, and whether or not those profits are repatriated back to the U.S. or not. Profits that are not repatriated back but are invested in the countries in which these operations are run do not get taxed at U.S. tax rates, and in fact are taxed at a much smaller rate. So it affects a lot of the Fortune 1000 companies around the world who are global companies. And I think you're going to see a lot of protests about this. You're going to see a lot of opposition to these because it isn't actually about outsourcing per se. For instance, it really doesn't affect companies like Genpact or Infosys or TCS or others. But it is about American corporations investing in profitable operations overseas, which, now, I'll add one other thing. This has been debated many times, not just by the Obama administration, but as far back as the Clinton administration, which is, should these tax reliefs be allowed to be sustained? Clearly, they've taken a stance. But this is not a very popular move amongst corporations, and I think you're going to see, the American Chambers of Commerce, etc., and the companies themselves really taking this up as something that should be avoided.
Right, but Pramod, how do you at NASSCOM intend to take this up? Because I know that, delegations from NASSCOM have been to the U.S., you've met with the U.S. officials, you've met with U.S. senators, but that doesn't seem to have cut too much ice as far as the U.S. is concerned. We've seen what's happened on the H-1B visa side, and now this. Even though, as you rightly pointed out, this doesn't seem to be just an anti-outsourcing instance, it seems to be a much larger move against globalization per se, but nevertheless, what is the Indian IT industry going to do about this?
I think that's an important point, Shirin, and we will absolutely make our voice heard again. I hope it helps more, and I think even on the H-1B visa, I think we should remember these are just bills that have yet to be passed, and I suspect many of the versions on those bills or the clauses in those bills might get changed. So one, we will oppose it. What we are going to point out very clearly is that investment overseas for American corporations is what makes them healthy. They have access to global talent, global engineering, and global markets. What is amazing about this bill, it tends to suggest that you shouldn't be investing in global markets. A country as big as America cannot survive without investing in global markets. Two, the use of the word Bangalore is odd because it is more aimed at China, I suspect, where investment by American corporations is far greater than it is in India. And I think those points need to be brought out very clearly, that this is not an either-or answer. That's the big point here. It's not as if you can set up the same plant in China, run it at the same efficiency, and just put it back in America and run it at the same efficiency and the same cost level. It will make companies uncompetitive. It will take them out of markets. And I don't know that any government in the world is going to be willing to look at this and take it lying down.
Just a point about the tax differential as well, Pramod. Really the tax differential between the US tax rate and the Indian tax rate is a mere 1%. So is that not much of a significant impact as far as companies that are based in the US and are setting up operations here? Do you see that having a material impact at all?
No, not really here, but the way the foreign tax credit and the subpart F income clauses work is that they get more than adequate relief for whatever Indian taxes they may have paid, so that the net taxes they end up paying overall is actually a much lower number for income generated overseas. So in fact, the Indian or the US tax rate, the fact that they're very close together actually does not affect this, and it is a real benefit to major corporations which have substantial operations overseas.
Right, Pramod, we have a lame duck government in place. In fact, we should have a government in place, a new government in place in the first week of June. But be that as it may, have you been able to speak with legal experts? Can we take this matter, for instance, to the WTO? Because this, again, as I'm pointing out, and you've pointed out, is not just anti-outsourcing. This is anti-globalization in that sense.
Shireen, we will explore every opportunity. I'm not sure that this will ever go to somewhere like the WTO, because it is a real tax relief for companies, which is provided to incent them to invest worldwide and provided as a shelter for profits they make overseas. So it is a very domestic U.S. matter in the limited context of the tax rules themselves. So I'm not sure that WTO or anybody else will necessarily play a part here, because this is not, by the way, a tax rule that many other countries have. Now, other countries have different clauses which allow companies to make money overseas which doesn't get taxed in their home jurisdiction. And there's a variation of all kinds in these clauses. So I'm not sure it'll get to WTO, but I think we must attack it because it is a direct attack, potentially, on investments from U.S. corporations in countries overseas, which help them create employment in the markets in which they serve and in which they hope to make money by selling their products and services. And that's a very important element that has to be brought out.
Pramod Bhasin, many thanks for joining in today with that perspective.